Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's first panel. Our first panel will cover the topic of innovation and entrepreneurship in the armed services. It's my great privilege to introduce the moderator for that panel today, Mr. Bob Loithen, class of '82. He's former president of the Alumni Association, and he is working with our veterans to make them and help them become great entrepreneurs as the CEO of Veteran Crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Bob Loithen.
Thank you and good morning. I was trying to think of how I was qualified to lead a panel with so many generals on it. And not all of you know this, but some of my brotherattes do know this. Actually, I've been dealing with generals for quite a long time, starting with an event that when I was 19 years old that happened on 22 February 1980 in barracks at or about 0200 hours. It's a pleasure to be here today. I hope that the technology works for us. It's a great panel, and I'm very interested in leading this discussion. Our first panelist today is the head of the Air Force Department here at VMI, Colonel Steve Briggs. 27 years as an Air Force officer. He's a B-1 pilot. He went through Air Force ROTC at the University of Texas in the class of 1991. Please welcome Colonel Steve Briggs. On our screen today, it's a great pleasure to have a friend of mine, Brigadier General Dan Raisin Kane. He is an F-16 pilot, VMI grad from the class of 1990, an entrepreneur in Dallas, Texas. He's currently on active duty, and he serves currently as the Deputy Commanding General for Special Operations Joint Task Force in Iraq and Syria, and he is on with us via Skype from Doha right now, so welcome, General Kane. We may have an additional guest here shortly, another member of the class of 1982, Major General John Motley Mott. John may join us in a few minutes. He's on his way from the airport in Doha to this location, and he may be able to stick in and join us in a minute. John is an A-10 pilot. I think he has more hours in the A-10 and combat sorties than any other A-10 pilot in the Air Force currently. So hopefully John will be able to join us in a few minutes. Next on our panel is Admiral William Andy Brown. And Andy's biggest claim to fame is that, of course, he was a RAT Company commander in the class of 1980. But he did go on to serve in the United States Navy after leaving VMI. He's retired from the Navy in 2017, and he was most recently the Director of Logistics at the JCS. He received his MBA from the Naval Postgraduate School, and he currently works with a business that's promoting activities for veterans in the National Defense Transportation Association. He's a logistician by trade, and so welcome to Admiral Brown. And last but not least, General Vi. General Vi is a Martinsville, Virginia native, a graduate in 1980 of Virginia State University, commissioned into the Signal Corps in the Army, spent a lot of time at Fort Bragg and other senior commands throughout his career, ending at Army Material Command, which was a $50 billion organization and 120,000 people. So please join me in welcoming General Vi. Gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. I'm going to do my best to facilitate this today. How many, by show of hands, how many engineers are in the room? Okay, a fair number. So you guys are going to understand what I'm going to say. in 11 years ago, the economy went south. To use an engineering term, the fecal matter was striking the impeller. And so I had to change my business model. And looking at 15 years of business at that point in time, it dawned on me that every time I had ever worked with a business that had a military veteran leading that business, that we had a positive outcome. And so it was that point in time that I took the pivot and focused my business exclusively on those companies. And I discovered a lot of things about veterans and what they do in business and how they react as entrepreneurs in that process. So if you've been to VMI or you've been in the service, there are certain things that I think I know about you. I know that you're a team player. I know that you've got grit. I know you won't quit. I know that you know how to communicate, and I know you know how to plan. You know how to organize people and get them focused on an objective. And most importantly, I think you have a heightened sense of ethics and you have personal accountability. And I don't think that those virtues are common in the broader society today. And so with that as a lead-in, I was having a conversation with some of our panelists over breakfast. And Admiral Brown, you said that you thought the next 10 years was going to be pivotal, that we're at an inflection point. So I'm going to throw it to you to open up the conversation this morning. Admiral Brown.
Thanks, Bob. And it's great to be back at VMI, and what a great place, and probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And the product that we produce in general, thank you very much for being part of that or leading that. The product that we produce is going to become more and more entrepreneurial, I think, and it'll be a cultural change. But we are at an inflection point as per the academics, and I was a little surprised we didn't get into it in the last session, but we're in what they're calling the fourth industrial revolution right now. The first being when we went to steam, and we had steamships and things like that. And then the second industrial revolution is when we started harnessing energy, electricity throughout our whole industry. You know, it just basically changed everybody's lives. And then the next age that changed everybody's lives was like the computer age. And now the fourth industrial revolution is more digital. And we are just at the kind of the beginning of learning how to harness all the things that are going to come out of the digital age. It is going to change every industry, everywhere around the world in significant ways that we haven't even dreamed of yet. So in the last discussion, the point about being open-minded is really going to be important, and grasping at and recognizing where the opportunities are. I do believe that the Navy, in particular, in where I grew up, and in the joint world, we in the military are starting to take on this effort to be not only just be more innovative, but how do we grow more entrepreneurs, you know, from a young age, and support them in the way that they've been trained. And they are the people that are coming out now. They call them digital natives. They grew up in with computers. They didn't grow up like me back here, and we didn't even have cell phones, or everything was mail. So things have changed, and we've got to grasp that change.
Good morning, everyone. And again, it's a great opportunity to be here with you this morning as well. And I echo the Admiral's comments in terms of this evolution that we're undergoing at this point in time. The remarks by Dr. Morris, I found that they were absolutely spot on. And someone whispered to me, that, does the Army get that? Or are services getting that message now? And the answer is an emphatic yes. The Army recognized, and I think the other services are recognizing, that we have to change in this world of great power competition. Very complex. And so the Army has moved out, as most of you have probably read about, and established a 4-star command. They've put $30 billion behind that command and initiative to move towards innovation. And they established it in Austin, Texas, again, where you have entrepreneurship there, startups, incubators, because we know we have to leap ahead, not just make advances in the next generation of weapon and combat platforms that we have, but we must leap ahead. Because the systems we're operating on today were built in the 70s, before any of us came into the service, and we've been modernizing those platforms and capabilities up to today, but we reached the peak of what we can do with that. And with an adversary that's continued to change and adapt and invest in AI, machine learning, other type capabilities, it is well known that we have to move forward. I won't speak for the Air Force, but I was at the Space Symposium this past week, and the announcement of the Stand Up to Space Force, because again, the next conflict and what we may see may occur in space. And so cyber and all the other kind of capabilities that we need to be able to advance the capabilities and deter adversaries and, in fact, win if we have to go against them.
You thought out of place being here on the panel with the Admiral and General, so myself. But thanks for having me here. I'll just keep it real short. If you haven't read the National Defense Strategy, I think the military gets it, right? Innovation, the unclassified version is 11 pages long. It mentions innovation 11 times. One of the key goals for addressing a rapidly changing environment and the threats that we face is the ability to innovate. It's going to be driven by the threat, it's going to be driven by the cost, and it's going to be driven by the speed that we're going to have to operate in.
Okay. So General Kane, I want to throw a question at you, being sort of the special operator in the room. In my experience, I haven't met a Navy SEAL yet that doesn't have a side hustle. I've met a lot of special operators that become entrepreneurs. Can you talk a little bit about the culture in the special operations community that encourages innovation?
Sure. Well, first, good morning, Admiral, General, everybody there. Thanks for having us from here in Doha, and hopefully General Mott will be able to join. You know, it's funny, I haven't met a Navy SEAL that doesn't have a side gig or a stock in hair gel, so they're all innovative folks for sure. You know, I think the core competency of why we see so many entrepreneurs come out of the soft community is really no different that I see out of the entrepreneurs that are successful coming out of the broader military. And you alluded to some of those. It's toughness, it's team players, it's a culture of teamwork, it's a work ethic, and it's a grit and resiliency. And, you know, I would contend that we see a higher percentage right now of folks coming out of the soft community, but that we should scale that in the rest of the community as well. And when we look more broadly at the Department of Defense and the need to innovate and compete globally, that's not just limited to the soft community. You know, we see the Air Force at AFWorks, in campuses in Las Vegas and in Austin and Texas. We see, as the General said, Army Futures Command. We see things like the Defense Entrepreneurs Forum that has really gotten a hold of some great talent at the company grade and enlisted grade level to push the department to where we need to be now to be able to compete globally. And that is really fracturing the innovation models of old, fracturing the business models of old, shortening the time to field capabilities that are compelling in the joint and future environment. And so I think it's all the basic things, to come back to your question about VMI: teamwork, toughness, resiliency, grit, honor, that all go into great military entrepreneurs that we see. Some coming out of the soft community, hopefully in the future coming out of the executive.
Thank you. So, General Vi, we were talking over breakfast a little bit. You know, a little over 50% of VMI cadets commission, which means a little under 50% don't. But we were talking a little bit about the importance of that, and I want to throw this out to the panel and just sort of ask a question generally. And also you, General Kane, because you're an entrepreneur yourself. How does your experience in the military now translating to your work at Booz Allen? And talk a little bit about the ethics, the chairman, as you serve in ethics for Booz Allen as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks. First and foremost, I think when you're in this program here at VMI, and what I've been able to observe, and the foundation that is set for the cadets that are here, as they begin to transition, the portion of the class, that percentage that will go into service, uniform, and those who will enter into the commercial world, I think it's important that we continue to keep that community together as we go forward, because the innovation that we need to solve some of the greatest challenges that we're facing all of the services at this point in time, it's going to require not only uniform, it's going to require working with industry, it's going to be working with academia and the private sector to be able to make the advances that we're going to require. And so as I've transitioned from the military and looking at the innovative solutioning to support our forces 17 years at war, providing the logistic support they need, being able to transition those assets to various theaters, we've not been able to do that alone. We have to rely on commercial and the corporate sector to be able to help us with that. And so to me, that's what's so great about when the cadets graduate from here and they move on, is that those that do not actually enter active duty, is that they maintain those connections with their classmates. Because as you're seeing here today, probably folks who are in the room today have classmates who are still serving today and who still have great challenges and that they're attempting to find solutions and they need help with. Well, that's where that relationship starts here at VMI that you can continue to carry on.
And I think when we were talking earlier too, sir, you kind of conveyed that the qualities are the same. You know, people that work with veterans, you're promoting, Bob, you're promoting veteran businesses because of the qualities that the veterans have. But the folks that don't go into the military that come out of VMI, they have those same qualities. And General Vi was also making that point as well.
Yes. Anything? So let me ask another question. So the Marines like to instill the will to adapt and overcome into every recruit. And while that's intended for the battlefield, I'd argue that veterans in business carry this into every challenge. Do you have any stories that you could share, either in the military or in business, about adapting and overcoming, a challenge and the resulting innovation in the military as an example?
Well, one of the biggest ones I ever had was when my boss told me I was going to be fired. And when you think you're going to be fired, you can start innovating. I was given permission to innovate, and we had an airplane that was EA-6B, which was a national asset because of the jamming capabilities, and we were having a lot of engine problems, and the folks that fixed the engine were saying, hey, it's all a supply problem, give us the parts and we'll fix the engines. And so we had Pratt & Whitney come in and do a review, and they identified a bunch of things that weren't logistics, they were kind of engineering related. And basically they built these plates up on these engines, and if they were out of balance, they would shake on the test cell, and they'd fail the test, and then they'd have to be rebuilt, and then you got a parts problem. But I had to go into the depot down in Jacksonville, and I had to tell the CO, sir, you and I are about to get fired. And he goes, nah, I don't think so. I said, yep. And he goes, well, you go anywhere in the plant that you want to go. And so I got Pratt Whitney in there, and I got my guys in there, and we hung through it, and we fixed that engine problem. But it came down to fix the first one, get the next one out, then start getting predictability into the system and carry on, normal production. But the one other thing in the long term, though, that I found out of that is if the lessons aren't always learned, if you don't carry them through to the second and third generations of folks that are doing those things. So sometimes people lose the loving feeling because they relax, and some of these problems you can't relax on. So that was one of my stories.
I'll just share one, and of course, the Admiral and I shared a little bit of this same issue, challenge at the time, and that's when we were coming to the conclusion of combat operations in Iraq. And we had, of course, something upwards of $25 billion of equipment that was in Iraq, and of course, we knew the deadline for being able to get our troops back home by the holiday, and I think this was around the September-October timeframe, to be able to move that equipment out, either to retrograde a portion of it back to the United States. We were building up in Afghanistan at the time, so a portion to move from Iraq to a landlocked country in Afghanistan, and then, of course, to distribute some to our allies, and then, of course, we destroyed some of it in place. And so at that point in time, in terms of being innovative, I remember arriving there and looking at the throughput of equipment that needed to get back to the States that we're sending home. And of course, as we had the agricultural inspectors there, and so to be able to prepare a piece of equipment to be cleaned and in the state to be able to be placed on a U.S. transport ship to bring that back to the States required a significant amount of cleaning and so forth. And so we reached out to industry to see what we could do to accelerate the cleaning process, pressure washing, all those types of things, because we only had, I think, 2 in country at that point in time, and moving a massive amount of equipment and with about a 90-day period of time. And so that's one where we reached the industry. They came up with a solution to allow us to be able to do that. We worked with the Defense Logistics Agency to be able to determine what we needed to destroy in theater. So we had to bring in equipment to be able to do that successfully, accelerate what we needed to do. We push assets to our allies, and then work with all the services involved to be able to ship equipment to Afghanistan to build up. And so that was pulling a team together, being innovative in our thinking about how to address this problem set, working across all of those entities to develop a plan and then execute it to success. The good news of that is we were very, very successful. We didn't leave the equipment strewn across Iraq. We did that in a very professional way, as the Armed Forces are, United States does, in that point, and then supported our forces that were building up in Afghanistan. So again, innovative mindset, because there was not a playbook to be able to do that, and it required us working together as a team, but also working with industry to help us to come up with those solutionings. In fact, and it was very, very successful.
Yeah, we built the Northern Distribution Network that took basically logistics all the way from the Baltics over through Russia, and that was the northern route, and then there was a southern route through Germany and whatnot, all the way to Afghanistan by land. Because what's the one thing that a logistician doesn't want to run out of is options. And some people think it's coffee or something like that. But our main option was to go through Pakistan. And then Pakistan got tough. And then if Pakistan said we can't fly over. So you always have to be looking for options. And, you know, those options require innovation sometimes, because you just can't run out of something in a fight.
And I think to the cadets that are here, as you listen to these couple of stories that we've shared, being adaptable, being tenacious, assessing risks, assessing opportunities, seizing those, that's the fabric of what I think you receive here at this institution that you carry forward as you begin your careers, regardless of whether you're going to serve in uniform or you're going to serve in the business world.
Go ahead.
Sure. I could give a story, but I'm going to defer to General Kane if he wants to weigh on this. I'm sure he's got some as well.
I do want to ask General Kane sort of a follow-up question, because you have the unique position of being a business person who happens to be on active duty as a general right now. You run your own company, and you've been involved in the venture capital world to an extent out there in Texas. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, I spent about 15 years, just for context, about 15 years on active duty, and then made the decision to transition to being a part-timer and start companies. And we started 6 and sold 5 of them. And, you know, along the way, I will tell you, learned a tremendous amount about leadership, organization, building teams, how to communicate internal to your business, external to your business, to investors and stakeholders, and you know, learned a lot about discipline, and all with the goal of generating, you know, revenue and profit to the bottom line. And you know, what I found along the journey was that there really is, especially coming out of a great institution like VMI, those skills can translate into entrepreneurial efforts. And but in the end, what it comes down to is, what do you have inside yourself? And on the toughest days, at the toughest times, you know, can you dig deep and continue to move forward when all indications are that things are going to go south? And you know, in order to keep the panel going, I want to get to your questions and be able to answer the cadets' questions. But you know, we've got a lot of examples of that grit, the resiliency. When you don't think the real test is, you know, equally stressful to getting shot at on the ground or in the air is when you're worried about making payroll in a startup. And but in the end, it's, I think, all about hard work, resiliency, and of course a little bit of luck layered in there. But I'll just kick it back to you guys and ready to answer any questions when they come up from the cadets.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Colonel Biggs, I'm going to ask you this question as someone who's right in the middle of your career. Most civilians assume that the military is a bunch of automatons, but what's the real culture of the military today from your perspective?
Yeah, that would be furthest thing from the truth, right? And I'll address it. I'll start with the Air Force. Look at our roots, right? Air Force DNA is innovation. We have traced our roots back to a bicycle shop, right? Look at it. Look at the Billy Mitchell. Look at taking air power from something for reconnaissance to drop, maybe we can drop bombs, to putting a bomb today within a couple meters of the target. So we're all about adaptability, innovation. We train the cadets today, personally here as the PAS. We talk about that history, about it being in our roots. You know, if you haven't looked at our vision statement, you know, fly, fight, and win is our mission statement in aerospace and cyberspace, but our vision is fueled by innovation as part of that vision. And we teach them that, and we give them opportunities. So the best way I can give a cadet an opportunity is to get out of his way, because I will tell you, he will innovate and come up with new ways of doing things every day. Some of them surprising, some of them not. We try to keep it channeled in a positive direction. But everything from how our cadet wing is structured to how we're going to do the training for those going off the field training is up to the cadet wing. We give them the goals, and they decide how they're going to do it. So they have to think out of the box. And I think as leaders, that's really where we come in. You let them take that risk. And what a better place to take a risk than an institution like BMI and in training, and let them learn from their mistakes and give them the right vector. So, no, we're not automatons, absolutely not. I think we work hard, and you are very successful when you can find new solutions and new ways of doing things.
But I will tell you that sometimes our reputation, and it's something we should work on. I was talking to Professor Christopher Newport yesterday, and I told him what I was going to be doing today and what the panel was, and he laughed. He goes, I just do not think of military as being innovative and entrepreneurial. And here's a person that is a PhD and supports DOD in a lot of the things he does. So we do need to work on that, and we need to tell our story.
Yeah, I agree. I think we don't do a good job of messaging in what we in fact do. When we talk about the IED threat that occurred at the beginning and was mentioned in the previous presentation, I remember when that that challenge came. We were losing young men and young women as they were transporting fuel and ammunition and water in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we had, the Army has 12,000 scientists and engineers, probably not known, multiple prototype integration facilities and testing laboratories. People have been doing this, professionals, for 30, 40, 50 years, but they don't talk much about it. But many of the innovations that came out to add the add-on armor and some of the other capabilities that were placed on the Stryker vehicle to counter, or as our drivers were taking shots from the top of the mountains, the type of cover and concealment that was provided for them on their platforms, or counterfire systems that we put in place. Much of that, ground reconnaissance, much of that was developed in small laboratories working across all of the services. But again, we don't really tell that story in the way that we should for all of our services. And I think sometimes from the entrepreneurship side, the bureaucracy and being able to work with DoD. Oftentimes what we find is there are startups that would like to do service with the government or with DoD, but they find the entry points to be very, very challenging and difficult. So I think that's something that we all need to be able to put some energy into. But that's on both sides. I would say if you have people that you know that say, we don't really know how to do business, I think, again, that's where this foundation here at VMI provides you that opportunity, because you probably know someone who is, in fact, serving, that you can make that connection, make that introduction, that could break open that barrier to help us move forward.
So I have a colleague, and Blue Crump, you will know who I'm talking about, Lighthouse Labs and so forth, but there's an organization in the United States called the Bunker Labs, and it's run by a gentleman named Todd Connor. Todd's a Navy veteran, and the purpose of the Bunker Labs is to provide incubation of military veteran-led startup businesses. He made a comment at an event in Raleigh a couple of weeks ago, and I'd love to get your feeling on this, is that 10 years from now, their goal is that the United States military will be recognized as the #1 path to entrepreneurship. And I'm curious, from his perspective and seeing that, how does that translate, and how do you think the military, what's going on? There are projects within the military that are specifically innovation-oriented. There's, the Futures Command in Austin. There's other things that have been set up. I'd love to hear from you guys to talk about some of those specific things, but the military is being recognized, at least in my circles, as a clear path to entrepreneurship. And so please comment.
And again, it's not without challenges, but so we have the Defense Innovation Unit, which is headed up by a guy named Marcus. The board is quite strong. The fellow that from Alphabet was at Alphabet, which is Google parent company, is on the board. You've got DeGrasse Tyson on there. He's an astrophysicist kind of guy. So a wide number of different disciplines on that board. They held a panel to down select some innovative ideas, and the one that they chose was this Project Maven, which was to take all the video that we're gathering through the UAV, which UAV is an innovative thing. Military was responsible for that. To take all that data and process it using AI. Of course, Google ended up walking away from it. And so there's a culture there that they didn't understand really that we could make it the battlefield safer, really, using the AI. But I think, so that started at the top with the Secretary of Defense. And that is starting to move through all the services. I heard the Vice Chief of Naval Operations speak last week, and the front row was filled with young kids, young lieutenants out there from ships and whatnot, and they had all kinds of stories about, I had an idea, and they gave me some money, and I ran with it, and now we're implementing that throughout the Navy. So that's one strategy, and so they're trying to get the young kids involved with the ideas, but also trying to make acquisition faster. There's a new form of acquisition. Instead of having a program, per se, there's a new way to buy. It's called the OTA, Other Transaction Authority. You don't have to go through the whole thing. You can have a small prototype, so it's a crawl, walk, run type approach, and you can put a contract in place in a month and ask for a prototype. I like the prototype, okay, well, let's go to the next step. So, and down select. So, even on the acquisition side, they're trying to make it easier to buy things faster, but also get a good product.
I would just say, add, I agree wholeheartedly. I would just add, and I think a comment was made on national defense strategy. And when Secretary Mattis implemented that national defense strategy, coming on the end of where he had personally been involved in combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan and CENTCOM commander, those three priorities have really are pressing to change the way the department does business. The first being readiness, and that's in all terms of readiness across our personnel, our equipment, training, all those that lead. Second, building partner capacity, so working with our allies and our partner nations, as you saw in the previous presentation as well. Countries that are very, very innovative in what they're doing and being able to share those ideas. And then third is reform of all of the process for acquisition, procurement, being able to have the other transactional authority, other means to be able to enter into business with the department and present ideas. And again, I think you see with the Space Force, the new Space Force 4-Star Command, with the Army Futures Command, with the number of business leaders who are currently in politically appointed positions and depending on right now, you're seeing that business innovative mindset that's being pressed and opportunities for the resource and to be leveraged to change the way that we're doing business.
I'll take it down to a tactical level. I just know of several programs that the Air Force is instituting, and of course it starts at the top. If you listen to SecAF or the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, you can find multiple speeches on innovation, and they're leading from the front. Recently we had our second Spark Tank. If you haven't seen that, you can Google it, where SecAF, Chief of Staff, Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, as well as they brought in Mark Cuban from Shark Tank, and you had 6 ideas that had gone up through the chain. They got to pitch them. Bypass all the acquisition. Here's what we want to do. So straight to the top to get their ideas heard. The winner on that one developed a solar panel, self-powered chemical detection. Have a bunch of chemical detection units out around a base, battery powered. After every attack, got to go out, check them, battery's dying. He came up with a way to make it self-powered. Don't have to change the batteries. And he ended up being a winner. But there's a lot of great ideas. So that's one way. Chief of Staff also $70 million given down to the squadron level. If you break that out by the number of squadrons, that's anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 for each squadron to finance their own innovative and entrepreneurship type ideas. And then General Kane also mentioned AFWERX, that's WERX. Their sole mission is to connect academia, members of the Air Force as well, junior members, and business with the right people to sell their idea and get it heard and get it out there. So Air Force is taking it seriously, a lot of programs out there.
I actually watched the Spark Tank video, and Mark Cuban is a huge supporter of military veteran entrepreneurs, and it's amazing, that this idea came because literally this airman was tired of changing batteries. He was doing a lot of them. The numbers were astounding. One last question, and then I'm going to open it up to questions for the audience. So in just a second, get ready to come down. I seeded the audience with some questions. I know who you are, so if you guys don't ask questions, I'm going to ask questions of you guys, especially the younger ones that, in any case. But let's talk about the negative side of entrepreneurship. Admiral Brown, we talked about it. You said, one of the questions is, as a leader, the lesson you learned was how to kill innovation in a bad example. Could you talk about that, and then we'll open up the questions?
Yeah, first of all, I'd grown up thinking that innovation was in my job description and that my boss wanted me to be innovative. I always thought that until I walked in the office of my admiral one night and I said, "Hey, boss, I got a good idea." And I thought, well, it's late at night, we're going to have a chat, And we had been contemporaries, and then he was promoted to flag, and so we're sort of friends. But he said, "Andy, if you want to talk to me, get on my schedule." And I'm like, whoa, last time you'll ever get an idea from me. And he didn't get that one. And so my reaction could be to become like that or to not become like that. So I always had an open door policy. And I told my staff to, you know, which drove them crazy. But if somebody needs to talk to me and I'm not, you know, busy with something and my door is open. And a lot of people took them up on it and would come in and talk to me, and we'd settle whatever was on their mind, make that chain of command a lot shorter, but good ideas would come out of those sessions. So my strong recommendation is for the cadets to think about what is your leadership style going to be? How do you grow innovative ideas and not squelch them? And so please just, it's a very much a relationship type of thing because you don't have all the ideas. It's a team sport, but I would just encourage you as you become leaders that you keep that door open.
I was very fortunate that I spent an early part of my career at Fort Bragg in the 82nd Airborne Division. And with the mission that we had, you had to be innovative. Because when you got on those aircraft and you were flying forward to destination unknown, once you're there, what you have with you is what you have with you. So you had to be innovative in terms of how you boarded the aircraft, to how you cross-load the equipment that you had. There was no room to not be a member of the team. And so exactly, I think it's all about establishing a culture of innovation. How do you build that into your organization that you're always looking for opportunities? You have a means to be able to express that. You're willing to prototype and test an idea, and you're very receptive to that. Because if you don't, if that environment is where, okay, I've got to get on your schedule to talk to you about something, I'm probably going to move on somewhere else, as Andy just mentioned. So it's all about that. How do you develop that innovative mindset and culture within your organization so you can accelerate? And when it's there, it's amazing what young people will come up with, and the ideas of how to do things better and differently and more effectively and more efficiently and less cost. But you've got to involve them.
So at this point in time, we've got about 14 minutes left, and I hope you've got some questions. Please come to the microphone so that General Kane can hear us in Doha as well. Go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'd like to ask a question relative to the friction caused between innovation, modernization, and current sustainment. I think that we talk about innovating faster. We talk about ways to energize the small units, but we lived through a period of time where new equipment and urgent needs were thrust upon units in contact and in combat with little to no long-term sustainment thought built into that. And I think we saw that oftentimes that can create problems if we don't have life cycle sustainment built into innovation. So that's really kind of a question I'd like to hear your comments on how you balance that. But also from a fiscal standpoint, S&T, R&D budgets have not been funded typically, and nor have our O&M accounts. So when decision makers need to balance these, how do you talk to them about prioritization?
First, that's a great question. And it's all about balance is the best that I can tell you. There's a rheostat that the service chiefs have, and that rheostat with the resources they are provided, 3 pillars on that. In strength, you've got to be able to man, train, and equip the force. Modernization, you've got to continue to evolve and modernize the force. And then readiness, and readiness is expensive. And especially when you've got forces that are deploying or are deployed and involved in combat operations. So there's a limited amount of resources to be able to balance with that. But those are the 3 rheostats. Whatever you can afford from an in-strength standpoint, regardless of the service, what do you put into readiness to maintain the forces that you have that are currently in combat operations or deployed or contingencies or preparing to deploy, and then modernization. And so, and it's the speed that's involved. When you've got forces that are going forward, you have to rapidly provide the capabilities to them. And so you may not pay as much on the front end of life cycle sustainment for those systems and capabilities. And because we've been at war as long as we have in the CENTCOM theater, many of those processes we had in place when I first came into the service, they atrophied over time, where we were more acquiring proprietary systems. We were filling them very quickly without life cycle sustainment situations. And so we reached a point now where we have to make decisions on what we're no longer going to sustain. So what programs do we kill? What programs do we continue to modernize and invest in? And then how do we put, which is the most important, is where we're going in the future. For the Army, and not speaking for the Army, but just knowing what the Army has done, the Army looked at every program across its portfolio. And I think they either killed 22 programs, restructured 22 others to find $30 billion that they could put into modernization or innovation. That was done at the very senior levels of the service, from the Secretary, the Chief of Staff of the Army, down, and that's the investment that's going into the Futures Command in Austin at the Capitol Factory, along with all the cross-functional team leads. So it is a challenge. I would just tell you it's a balance there, but it's recognized, and again, I don't speak for the Army, but it's recognized, my understanding, across all the services as they address this challenge.
Yeah, I think it is recognized. In fact, Congress recognized it, and they shut down the OSD, acquisition technology and logistics, and made it acquisition and sustainment. So now we have somebody responsible for sustainment. The next step should be to change the way we do program management, where program managers are trained when they go to learn how to be program managers, that they are responsible for life cycle support. Well, the fact is, the piece of sustainment that they're responsible for gets very, very little help, very, very little money, because they go on to the next, okay, now I got a new mod I got to put in, and that's funded, so I'm not, they don't do a lot of sustainment work, and 60% of the cost of a weapon system is in sustainment. So we've got to change the way we do program management for sustainment. The last thing I would say is, do not underestimate how much cost is in the sustainment of software. And software is driving costs way high. We've got to learn how to get to the cloud fast. We've got to shut down systems that are legacy. I know 2 or 3 systems right now. So the household goods system that we operate to move all of our service members around, that costs $30 million a year just to sustain this broken system. So, you know, I would chase the money. You want to innovate, follow costs and drive down costs, and you will innovate. You've got to follow the money, find out what the cost drivers are, and take down those costs. And there's good costs and there's bad costs, and you know, that's where the leadership decision comes in. But don't underestimate the cost of software sustainment.
Okay, so we're in the lightning round now. We've got 5 or 6 questions, so go ahead.
Make it quick. David Staub, Horizon Ventures, 09. I found it very interesting that the comment about the military being looked upon as a breeding ground for entrepreneurs in the next 10 years, and I think one of the overlooked reasons for that is the very real opportunity to lead people and lead people effectively, which is something I'm incredibly passionate about. I would love to hear examples of how each of you have seen your military experience of leading people translate to your entrepreneurial endeavors. And I don't know if you had like a story of a tough decision you've had to make in your entrepreneurial endeavors leading people that you've gained from that experience.
General Kane, do you have a response to that? Could you hear that question?
Yeah, you know, I'll give you a tough one. One of our businesses was an aviation business. We were supporting various clients. We actually had an airplane crash and we lost 3 people. And when you want to think about difficult leadership challenges to work through in taking care of families in the middle of really disaster and tragedy, and at the same time thinking about how to sustain your business, keep it going, and then scale over time. That to me was one of the biggest examples of the ability to lead through trauma, lead through turbulence, and have the ability to maintain the strategic picture while working very tactical level problems. And I really attribute that to my background as a military officer and leader.
Okay, thank you. Barker Squire.
Barker Squire from Crane Works, Inc. Thank you all for being here today. I've got a cadet-focused question. So I'm curious what you all didn't learn in undergrad or in the military that cadets should start thinking about now, because everybody transitions at some point in time. So how can they start getting prepared for that now?
I'd just say that as I went through my career, I was so focused on my career, it wasn't until I was at the very senior levels that I really looked to industry and to understand what was taking place in industry. It was just the fact that we were resource focused internally, and that's just the way the leadership that I grew up under is building teams, teamwork, and cohesion, and working through that part. And so I think later on, what I learned is that there's so much innovation, so many great ideas, and there's so much value working with the corporate world and working with small startups and others that I wish I had known early in my career. I probably could have solved some of the challenges I had much quicker than trying to work through the process we had internally.
I would just say take the opportunities offered during the breaks, during the summer breaks and whatnot. I had two sons go here. One of them worked in the biology department every year. It didn't go home. And I'm like, man, didn't you want to just get out of there? And he's like, no, he was interested in the research. So I think, you know, in a lot of ways, cadets are more interested in really what they're studying. And I think that if I had to go back, I would take more opportunities during the summer to really, you know, learn about the field that I was trying to tackle.
I just want to welcome Major General John Mott, my brother Rat, great Echo Company partner of mine from the class of 1982. So please welcome General Mott. He's out of breath because he's been running from the airport, so I appreciate him sticking in. Nate, go ahead.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here. General, I was one of those Marine NCOs moving those billions of dollars of equipment out of Iraq back in '09. Brought back some good memories. So gentlemen, a lot of the examples that we've given here today are around what I would consider internal innovations, around operations. And any entrepreneur knows, and research shows, that about 10% of your risk is in the ability to produce a good or service. 90% is actually how you take it to market. And so I'm curious, if you think of market as the countries that we operate in, as the people groups that we operate in, how is the military being innovative around influencing those people groups? And I'm thinking specifically about the more traditional types of environments that our military is in.
Anybody from the Air Force? Yeah. Did you hear the question?
I'll jump in, but
okay.
You know, we have this gray area of conflict now it's really societal. And we've got to work with other countries to it's not a hard power type thing, it's a soft power thing. We've got to know how to dial that from hard power to soft power and in between. And so we've got to get better at being able to fight in this gray area. And I think, you know, the soft community is very much in tune with the type of operations. I forget what does MESO stand for. Military information something operations. So I think that is an area that we're going to really have to focus on. But it's an example, and I think we're getting traction right now that it's recognized that we've got to do a better job in that area.
Bill Ballou, Azimuth Equity. I'm a Navy veteran, and I was a submarine officer aboard the USS Jimmy Carter. And when you're dealing with nuclear power, often the last thing you want is for your reactor technician to suddenly have a good idea.
Boring is good.
Yeah, right. So I think on the strategic level, innovation makes a lot of sense to everybody. But on the unit level, you often want some level of predictability and reliability. So how can a young officer encourage and promote innovation while controlling it and managing it without discouraging that innovation?
John, is your mic on?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question real quick? It was a little garbled, and then we'll take it from here, and I'll probably kick it to General Mott.
Yeah, sorry. My question is, how can a young officer in a unit control and manage innovation without discouraging it?
Hey, this is Major General John Mott. I apologize for Kramer in late here, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So, you know what? I think it's way more accepted now to allow, you know, subordinates at whatever level to take risks to come up with good ideas. And so I see it being more encouraged by the higher leadership at all levels. I would, you know, an example from my Guard experience in Connecticut Guard, and specifically dealing with defense industry, the National Guard Reserve and Equipment account money that we get to modernize, some call it legacy, we like to refer to as combat proven equipment, is to work directly with defense industry, and we power our action officers down to the lowest levels, even at the captain and major level, deal directly with defense industry, detailing our requirements, and then setting up our roadmap for quick execution to provide the warfighter what he needs. We're looking for 80% of the solution and 20% of the cost from the big acquisition networks that are out there. So we deal directly with the defense industry, and those young officers and even enlisted, a lot of the joint terminal air control, things like that, have the engage in that conversation and keep us updated with doing. And then we meets all the guidelines as we press forward so we can get the added combat capability to the field within 3 years instead of taking 10 years, some of the big acquisition process. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but give me a follow-up if that does.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add from a startup standpoint is the point about the good idea fairy showing up at the last minute there. I think that'll how you set expectations to the team, and you want to encourage and inspire innovators, and just set some boundaries there on what's going to be your left and right limits, and that helps take it down.
Yeah, can I just say, in the Navy, we have to get back to the basics when it comes to driving ships and the safety and all that. So we're going to be safe there, but young officers need to be operationally innovative. How do you fight that? How do you fight that submarine? You know, those are the areas. Also within the wardroom, how do you improve the relationships in the wardroom? But the basic competence has got to be there, but there's still that operational art that officers need to learn.
Okay, this will be our final question because we're right at the end of our block. Go ahead.
It's really less of a question and more of a comment, because the Admiral said something that I didn't want the cadets or the young alumnus to overlook. The Admiral talked about the fourth generation industrial revolution. The last panel discussion I was involved in Palo Alto had to do with the fourth generation industrial revolution and the social contract, meaning they're thinking that the innovation is going to happen so fast that 30% of the knowledge workers are going to be unemployed, and they're trying to figure out what type of social contract can be created in order to keep that level of population engaged in a positive social construct. So if you haven't looked into the fourth generation industrial revolution, it is definitely worth a look.
Thank you. So this is going to conclude our panel. I realize I'm standing between you and lunch, but I want to say a couple of things. First, this wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. So again, thanks to Lighthouse Labs and to Mass Mutual. Really appreciate what you guys are doing to support the BLIS conference today. To General Vi, Admiral Brown, Colonel Biggs, to my brother Rat, General Mott, and to General Kane coming to us from Doha. I hope you guys will express your appreciation at this point and give them a big round of applause. Thank you, guys.
Gentlemen, could I have you join me in the middle of the stage? General Mott, General Kane, thank you very much for taking time. Very busy in theater. We hope to catch up with you when you redeploy back from the States, but thank you for your participation.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity to participate, and feel free to forward my email address if anybody wants to follow up with any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, thank you very much. A lot of wisdom, experience, and insights passed on to the entrepreneurs in this room. So on behalf of the superintendent, the staff and faculty, and our great Corps of Cadets, thanks very much for participating today, and please accept this small token of our appreciation. Thank you. One more round of